Going to break into our programmes here at France 24 because the French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has just arrived at the Elysee Palace, in fact, to hand in his resignation. You can see those cars there arriving on the in the shot as we've been hearing during the day here on France 24. Gabriel Attal said last night on French television that he would hand in his resignation today, and it seems that he is arriving there to meet with Emmanuel Macron. International Affairs editor Doug Herbert is joining me here on set to bring you up to date with all the latest. Doug, it does seem then that Gabriel Attal is going to do what he said he was going to do and hand in his resignation.
Yeah, like you said, he said he was going to do it. There's no surprise there. Look, what's going to happen, in the medium term with the next prime minister, this is what all of France is asking right now. France has been left with no government, essentially. There is no parliamentary majority. There is no bloc that has emerged. There's a bloc. The left-wing alliance has the most votes, but there's no clear pathway to the next prime minister at this point. There's going to be a lot of horse trading, a lot of haggling. Emmanuel Macron has made it clear that he's probably going to take his time in deciding. The Olympics are coming up in just over 2 weeks. He doesn't want to have France in political tumult. He wants to keep the ship of state literally steady, at least through the Olympics. So the betting is that, he's going to try to wait it out a little bit. And even though Gabriel Attal, as prime minister, is right now handing in his resignation, it is widely expected that Emmanuel Macron will refuse it. Let's not forget that Elysee Borne, after the legislative elections, who was then prime minister in 2022, she went in afterwards to also hand in her resignation, and Macron refused it at the time in order to keep things running smoothly. So we're expecting that sort of scenario. So, Gabriel Attal, an interesting scenario here because his tone, he was taken completely off guard on June 9th when Emmanuel Macron, on the evening of the European elections, all of a sudden shocked France by calling these snap legislative elections. There was this photo that went viral on the internet showing Attal surrounded by all the other cabinet ministers, literally their faces showing their shock. They had not been told. They were not in on this decision. And he clearly was not too happy about it, even if he didn't explicitly point the finger at Macron. He did say last night, he says, listen, I did not choose this dissolution of the parliament. And I will, but I will not suffer through it. So basically, he has made it clear he's sort of, if not parting ways with Macron, he's going to remain the prime minister in Macron's government. He clearly seems to be setting a much more independent course, trying to carve out his own personality going ahead, and perhaps not leaving himself completely at the mercy of Macron and his political destiny at this point, saying, at this point, I don't quite owe Emmanuel Macron anything anymore. There's nothing more that he can do or give for me. I have to now make my own political destiny. I have to be, to a certain extent, my own autonomous, independent figure. Like I said, nothing he said explicitly, Stuart, but it's clear that Attal right now probably sees himself as his own person. He's had time now at the helm as prime minister. He is clearly more popular than Emmanuel Macron. This campaign has shown that, and he's probably gained a lot of confidence along the way, and he probably has made a political calculation to a certain extent that while in the early days he was perhaps grateful to Macron for singling him out and choosing him at a young age, he was then 34, to be prime minister, he no longer really has to rely on Macron going forward. So he'll remain on as prime minister in order to do his duty, in order to steady that ship of state, most likely, but he's no love lost at this point, perhaps with Emmanuel Macron, and my sense is that no, he does not feel like his political bandwagon is now hitched to that of the president.
If you're just tuning into us here at France 24, we just saw Gabriel Attal's car arrive there at the Elysee Palace for him to hand in his resignation to French President Emmanuel Macron. Doug, if Macron does refuse Gabriel Attal's resignation and says, no, I want you to stay on, even if it's temporarily during the Olympics, how do you think the left will feel about that? Because they essentially won the elections yesterday. They are obviously hoping that Emmanuel Macron will reach out to them to be able to give them a shot at being prime minister, or somebody from one of the left-wing parties to be prime minister, and they feel that they now have the right to start implementing their agenda. Will they be upset that this is happening at this stage, or will they be happy, do you think, just to wait for a couple of months to let things settle and then make that move, if you like?
A little of both. Publicly, they're going to continue to insist, most likely to continue to insist, quite noisily and at every opportunity that it is incumbent, as they see it, on Emmanuel Macron to ask to appoint a prime minister from the left-wing alliance, given the fact that that left-wing alliance, all the parties together, garnered the most seats as a bloc in this legislative election. So they would argue that the case to be made, they are the largest, if not party, the largest bloc. The next prime minister must come from that bloc. Macron is perhaps, he hears their argument, but what Macron is probably likely to do is to try to find ways, because, his tactics have proven quite savvy, you can argue, until now, right? He's upended France's political landscape twice now, right? First, when he was originally elected, blowing up the traditional left and right and creating this new centrist movement. And now, even if that centrist movement is diminished, is a depleted movement, it still plays second, ahead of the far right, still has quite a few seats, trailing just behind the main left-wing alliance. He probably still thinks he's in a pretty good bargaining position and still has quite a lot of sway to call the shots. I wouldn't be surprised if Emmanuel Macron, in the back of his mind, doesn't think at this point he necessarily is incumbent on him to have to choose a prime minister from that left-wing alliance. He's probably going to try to see how the dust settles. He himself has said publicly in his one public comment, he is going to wait to see what the structure of the next National Assembly is, the makeup, the composition of it is, before he rushes to any decision. So in his mind, he's holding his cards close to his chest. He's not saying explicitly, yes, I will choose a prime minister. Let's just get through these Olympics and then I'll go to the left and ask for a prime minister. He said nothing of the kind. So he's being a little coy. He's being tactically coy. But like you said, yeah, from the left-wing alliance, they are going to keep the pressure on Macron. They are going to, at every turn, remind France and remind the voters, remember, you chose us. You voted for us as your largest bloc. The president needs to choose one of us. And the horse trading, I suspect, among the left is already sort of underway, with all of them trying to decide who they would choose as their next prime minister. Remember, they need a little time as well as the dust settles. It's not just Macron. The left-wing alliance needs a little time to settle among themselves to decide who could best step forward and present a face of a united left-wing alliance, because this alliance has shown a lot of cracks and fissures. It hasn't been a hard unification and unity, and they need to decide among themselves who should they put forward. So I think on both sides, they may implicitly be ready to accept an Attal remaining in power for a couple more weeks, at least through those Olympics, but with the expectation that once those Olympics are over,
it's their turn.
You come to the left-wing alliance, Mr. President. You have no choice.
Okay, stay with us, Doug. We're going to cross to our reporter, Peter O'Brien, who's at the Elysee Palace for us. Peter, presumably you saw Gabriel Attal and pass by in his car there on his way in to see the president.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thankfully, that large van has now disappeared. But just a few minutes ago, we saw Gabriel Attal swoop in with his cortege into the Elysee just behind me. He's holding an absolutely critical meeting with Emmanuel Macron as we speak. As we know, Attal announced his resignation, that he'd hand in his resignation last night during his speech after the election results came in. And now we're about to find out whether Macron will do what we largely expect, which is refuse this resignation and allow Attal to continue on in a kind of caretaker role while Parliament attempts at least to sort out some of its differences and bring a coalition that can put in place a government which won't immediately be subject to a vote of no confidence, or if we're in store for another shock. There have been a lot of them in French politics in recent weeks. If he accepts his resignations, we're entering into even more unknown waters, because there's no current candidate who's sticking out, and actually the bloc in Parliament now, with a relative majority, have said this week they'll put forward a candidate, but so far nothing from them.
There is a little bit of a time pressure, if you like, as well, isn't there, Peter? Because Emmanuel Macron's due to leave in the morning for the NATO summit in the US. So to a certain extent, if there are going to be any big decisions this week, they've got to be made very quickly.
Yeah, they needed to have already been made before this meeting. This is the point where Attal is meeting with Macron right now, and there needs to be a clear decision. And to be fair to Attal, he's followed procedure. This is what Elisabeth Borne did when last time when the presidential party did not manage to get an absolute majority in Parliament. She offered up her resignation, and the president refused. She then went on to govern for another year and a half until she was replaced by Attal in January. So we're now very much seeing a similar thing play out, although of course the presidential party is now in second place rather than first.
We shall see how it plays out, as you say, Peter. Thanks very much, Peter O'Brien, there, a reporter joining us from the Elysee Palace. As I said that to Peter, Doug, Emmanuel Macron has got other pressing issues to deal with now, hasn't he? Literally, the timescale is incredibly tight.
Yeah, it's tight. And you just mentioned that NATO meeting that Joe Biden's going to be hosting in Washington. About 30 leaders are going to be gathering there.
Oh, we can see, just to interrupt you, we see Gérald Darmanin there, the Interior Minister.
The Interior Minister making his way either to or fro. I can't tell, maybe two.
Yeah.
But no, the schedule is very tight. And, stability, look, France has been in such tumult, such turmoil over the past, few weeks, since really June 9th, the evening of those European elections, European Union elections, that I think that everyone just wants a little bit of breathing space right now. Just, a deep breath, breathe out, just let us have a little bit of calm and serenity. And I think that probably, which is why it's more likely that he'll refuse the resignation, have Attal stay in place so he can go off to the U.S. and at least be there and present himself to the other leaders at NATO as a French president who has emerged from a legislative election that could have been a lot worse for him, could have been a total disaster. He managed to salvage something. Even if he's a weakened president, he still has at least back home a government that will be in place through the Olympics. He's probably going to try to reassure them we have some time to work things out. Everything is not lost. It's a lot better, the outcome, than we had expected. And then those leaders will be able to sort of also breathe a sigh of relief. So that's just my take on it right now. But yeah, he's not going to want to leave France right now in turmoil and then fly off to Washington with this big question mark with no prime minister. Who do we have now governing France?
And in turmoil, I mean, literally it's 2.5 weeks, isn't it, till the Olympic Games kick off? I mean, it must make all of that an awful lot easier at this stage. The same people will probably be in place, assuming Gabriel Attal does stay. It makes all of the organisation for that and just the general aura of that much calmer, doesn't it?
Obviously, I mean, the outstanding question was, and like I said, the results of these elections, Stuart, took most people by surprise. This was not the expected outcome, and which is why that headline, as we were saying in one of the French papers today, Libération, was oof, which can be sort of translated as phew. What a relief. Regardless of where you stand, at least they feel like the worst was averted right here. But for the Olympics, yeah, I mean, the last thing when Emmanuel Macron dissolved the parliament, there was a hue and cry among the Olympic organizers, among the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. The worst possible timing. Yes, the president has the constitutional authority once a year, if he so wishes, to dissolve the parliament. But this was not the time to do it. That was a sort of almost universal feeling here. So now the fact that the worst, you can say, for many French has been averted, the worst being you don't have the far right imminently about to take the reins of power as Paris steps up to the world stage and the world comes to Paris to participate in the biggest sporting events on the planet, at least you don't have the prospect of the far right in power. So, yeah. It's a relief in a sense, but like you can say, Marine Le Pen, the figurehead of the far right, basically tweeted, that the tide continues to rise. Our victory is merely postponed. So there's also a sense at the same time that after the Olympics, Macron's bought a little bit of time. France has perhaps bought a little bit of time, but the far right is still very much there, not just waiting in the wings. It is in Parliament with substantially more MPs, deputies, than it had in this outgoing Parliament, from 88 to some 100. What you have the final number? I think 132.
106. 143.
143.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not double, but it's nearly that. It's a big rise in its numbers. So down but not out. But the Olympics will be getting underway before that Parliament really takes shape, and with the prospect, at least for now, that the far right is held in abeyance, if not for, through the next election, at least for a year or so.
Yeah, not relief if you're a far-right supporter. I mean, they would have been
Right.
expecting to see Jordan Bardella going in there today.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the images we saw, right, were of the visible, very manifestly visible rallies, mainly in the big cities across France, most notably here in Paris, where you had, smoke bombs and fireworks and people honking horns in their cars and cheering and rallying, and a lot of young people you noticed out on the streets. It was a very young demographic, who tended to be supporters of this new Popular Front, the new left-wing alliance. But you're right, we didn't see the demonstrations of disappointment as much from supporters of the far right, because by definition they weren't visible, at least in the initial hours after this vote, out on the streets, manifesting and demonstrating their discontent and their disappointment. They took a lower profile. So, from the images, all you really saw was the celebratory mood, but you're absolutely right to underscore that there are millions and millions of people in France who are deeply frustrated, deeply disappointed at this outcome, Stuart, who see it as the far-right leaders, Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen, have been saying, see it as them being deprived of a voice, having essentially their votes stolen by what they seen as a cynical, tactical voting maneuver that has left a lot of French essentially disenfranchised, French who really believed it was time for their movement, given the numbers that they won in the European elections and in the first round of these elections, to step up to the plate. Their argument would be that if, in the absence of tactical voting, if France didn't have this unique system where you could withdraw candidates in 3- and 4-way races in order to show a united front against the far right, in the absence of that, they believe they would have been in power, probably with an absolute majority today. So they are frustrated, they're disappointed, and they're going to lay low, but they are not going away anytime soon.